Jana. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I am going to give the tech a minute, the robots a minute to make sure that we're live everywhere. And then
And
I
I'll
will.
have a little sip while
There we go. Perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think at the last
It
time
is, just to be fair, it is 5 o'clock here in Spain, so
I know
it's fair game.
we're a couple minutes late. We're kind of notorious for that. And I feel like it's good anticipation building. Like we always have kind of something going on. Either I can't find my bottle of wine, just that never happens. I can always find my wine.
Right.
There's always something. So, we had a little excitement, a little build up. Okay, we're live everywhere. Thanks to our great producer in the background, Kylie. Thanks for that. We are live. So, welcome back, everybody, to another Wine Wednesday. I am your host, Jana Cariñena, certified wine geek and co-founder of dVIN Labs. Today, we're joined by one of my favorite people in wine, fellow Canadian as well. Gotta love that. David Forer, Master of Wine. David, it's kind of a major title that you have. So I don't know. There's how many people have a Master of Wine?
I think it's around 420. They've only given out, or people have been awarded Master of Wine 550 times since 1983. It's a notoriously difficult exam. It's 3 parts: tasting, which is 3 days, 12 wines each day, and you have to get down to village level for some regions, all blind. You have to identify region, variety, winemaking. Then you have theory, which is 4 days. I think now it's 17 hours of theory essays.
Oh my God.
And then you write a dissertation, which takes so 5 days you do 3 hours, 3 hours, 3 hours, 3 hours. Well, that's 12, and then 5 the last day. Yeah, 17 hours. So it's a lot of. So people always ask me, what's the difference between Master Sommelier and Master of Wine? Master Sommelier is the pinnacle of the wine business for the on-premise. And so Master Sommeliers generally have worked the floor with few exceptions, and they know how the system of wine works in on-premise, and they get the Master Sommelier. And then they go be the head buyer for the restaurant group or hotel group, and they get to a very senior level. Master of Wine is different. It's about the international trade of wine. And so we have to know everything from viticulture all the way through to the final sale, all the crazy business stuff and international tax and all that kind of stuff. So it's a big rounded field, but it's notoriously difficult to pass. The tasting exam, the theory exam, I think, is about a 20-25% pass rate. The tasting hovers around 8%. And then you still have to write a dissertation. Yeah. So it was a bit of it took a little going. Do you want to hear how I ended up getting into this?
I do.
I'm a little non-traditional in this way. I had a 20+ year career. And so if you listeners out there who are in a job that you're not necessarily like and you love wine, you can listen to this with some attention, because I had a 20-year career in a completely different field. I was a statistician in drug development research. And so I worked on the design and analysis of clinical trials for cancer drugs that were going through the testing process for 20+ years. And I didn't really like it. I didn't feel the passion. The problem was, Jana, as many people will feel, and probably many of the people watching, I was good at it, but I didn't have the passion. So you get sort of stuck into it, and then you have this job, and then you have a mortgage, and you have tuition, and you have all this stuff. And one day I met my neighbor. I was living in San Francisco, met my neighbor, Sarah Floyd, who's a Master Sommelier. We became friends. And I said, Sarah, I want to get out of my business. How do I get into the wine business? I'm super passionate about wine. I'm a collector. I obsess about it. And she says, well, you can't become a Master Sommelier because you don't have any experience on the floor. But why don't you become a Master of Wine? I went, oh, what's that? And I embarked on this just naivete of I'll become a Master of Wine. So I went WSAT level 2, 3, 4, got into the Master of Wine program. 10 years later, I became an MW. It's a super great group of people. It opens doors for me. And it was with becoming a Master of Wine that I said, okay, I'm going to leave this industry. It gives me a bit of a jump start, so I don't have to go work on the floor in a wine shop and work my way through the ladder. The MW allows you to jump a little bit, and moved to Europe and left behind my whole statistician pharmaceutical industry life. And now I'm immersed in the world of wine.
Wow. Okay, I actually didn't know that. And I haven't seen you in a minute. I think I saw you. We did a Club dVIN event together in Barcelona, probably in 2003, I want to
Yeah.
say.
No,
Could be.
23, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, 23.
Yeah.
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 Yes, that makes
At the Hotel Arts. Yeah.
yeah.
23 would
I've been around
have
a
been a
lot.
good time to get into tech. Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay, and so you got your Master of Wine when then? I think it was it 17?
2017, so it's been 8 years, and then I moved to Spain with an idea of bringing some of the entrepreneurial spirit of San Francisco, because I was in biotech, pharma, but surrounded by technology. So all my friends worked at Google, Facebook, startups, whatever it was. I saw the rise and fall of many startups. But what I loved was talking to friends that worked in that area and said, okay, let's innovate, let's change, let's bring technology, let's leverage different parts of the world to enhance some aspect that consumers need. And so I thought, let me go to Europe and try to bring some of that entrepreneurial spirit to the wine world here in the old world.
In the old world. Are we allowed to say that? I get heat for that sometimes,
Listen, it's not like I'm calling people old. It's just the old world. It's the origin of fine wine in the world. Nobody's going to argue that France, Germany, Italy, Spain is where wine, the fine wine that we know it comes from.
I got to agree with you. I say it all the time when I talk about my background and story. I'm like, and then I wanted to get a foot in the door in the old wine world. And it's just it's too easy to offend people these days. So anyway, I've had a few comments on Instagram where it's like old world. And I'm like, oh, okay. So anyway, I roll.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the new world. It's not that new. Wine has been made in New Zealand for 60 years, California, hundreds of years. That came over with the settler. So it's not like it's that new anyway. But yes, so I came to Europe with the intent of looking at helping wineries, regions, innovate and change a little bit. It proved a little bit challenging just because the old world is also old in their ways. I would approach a bodega who's asking for help on export markets, and I would say, well, your label is kind of stale and looks like everything else. And they go, well, we can't change it because it's been that way for hundreds of years.
Right.
Well, your winemaking's, it's a little dusty. It's not keeping up with the times. You've got to clean it up a little bit. Yeah, but that's the way we've always made it. Yeah. And so it's been challenging to try and change a very strong inertia in the wine world. Now there are exceptions, and I think you're seeing that with Club dVIN is people are realizing, okay, we've got to do something to differentiate. We've got to look at how do we communicate our story? How do we get in touch with the final consumer? And so I've taken some of the desire to be innovative and brought it to our own winery.
So you're a global consultant then?
Yeah. Nowadays my focus is more just on our own brand. Our own wine. So we bought my dear friend and business partner, Frank Massart, who's quite a well-known sommelier. He was a UK champion in the 90s. He worked under Gerard Basset, the most famous sommelier that ever lived. We became close friends, and an opportunity arose to buy a set of vineyards in the Priorat.
Priorat, hold on. Is today's topic Priorat? I think it is. I think that it is. So before we get into that, I'm going to stop you, and I need to know if you have a glass of wine. Very good.
Now it's not Priorat.
I was going to say.
And I debated it. Listen, I have my wine sitting right here, but I'm actually drinking a Côte du Rhône from Saint Côme, which is a very well-known producer in the Southern Rhone. And you say, well, why are you drinking that, not your own wine? I think you need to, as a producer, be tasting wines from all over the world to understand what is going on. And I pulled this out of the cellar today because it has some of the similar grape varieties that we have, So it'll be Grenache based with Syrah, Mourvedre, and a bunch of other great varieties. And we have Grenache. So I want to see, how are they making wine? What is the style they're doing? I also am keeping in touch with, climate change is changing every single region in the world.
Yep.
And when you go to Châteauneuf-du-Pape now, you see, whoa, those alcohol levels are getting high. Wow, it's getting hot there. I wanted to see what they're doing in Gigondas, I believe, Saint-Côme.
Yep, it is, yes.
And I wanted to see what style it is. Too many producers, in my opinion, just drink their own wine or drink wine from their own region. But the top producers, and I try to emulate some of the top producers, will drink from many places. I'm going to name drop, which is just an obnoxious thing to do, but I was visiting Domaine de la Romanée-Conti years ago, and with Aubert de Villaine giving the tour, like this is literally the mic drop of name dropping. But I asked, actually somebody I was with asked Aubert, what do you drink at home? And he says, well, I have the privilege that visitors, when they come, who are winemakers, will bring their own wine. So I'm often drinking wine from outside of Burgundy because I want to understand what is going on.
That's legit.
And I think that's brilliant. Yeah, you should know your own region intently and insanely strongly. You should know it, but then you should be tasting from elsewhere.
100%. Okay, so let's just do a little maybe regional overview, because today's topic, this is Wine Wednesday. Every Wednesday we do this, and we always have a topic. So we've covered Bordeaux a couple of weeks ago. We did Left and Right Bank. We had Jane Anson on. We had Saïd El Youssefi on, one of a great négociant and co-owner at Chateau Saint Laurent. We had him on last week. We've got David on today. David is living in Priorat, right? Living in Burgundy.
Well, no, sorry. I live in Barcelona. Nobody lives in the Priorat.
Yeah, okay.
There's very small towns with nobody living there anymore. And I can explain to you why, but nobody. If I wanted to have any social life, if I wanted to have no social life, I would move to Priorat. It's difficult, yes.
Well, that gives a little sneak peek into the region in case anyone doesn't know where Priorat is. It is very close to Barcelona, but it's still far enough away, and there are enough windy roads that my first time visiting Priorat, I think I've never been more car sick. I remember I was trying to post and keep my followers on Instagram up to date about what I was doing, and I did not regret being on my phone so much in the car ever, as I did in Priorat. So we're in Catalonia, right? This is not your average wine region.
So everybody knows Barcelona.
Yeah.
North of Barcelona is the Costa Brava, these beautiful beaches. Priorat's the other direction. Go down to Tarragona, which is the next big town south. Go inland an hour. So it's an hour and 45-minute drive. And it's true, once you get there, once you go over the hill and you enter the big bowl that is the Priorat, it's twisty, windy roads. But here's the special thing, and I've done it hundreds of times. I've driven over that hill, and each time it's like magic looking at it as you go over. This is a region that has not changed in over 120 years. The phylloxera wiped out the region. Everybody left these villages. So think of, if you close your eyes and think of your classic Spanish hilltop village with that earthen colored buildings, that's the Priorat. There's 9 of them. They sit beautifully. Each one of these villages has a capacity to hold a couple thousand people, but each one holds about 200 to 250 people. Wow. So they're half abandoned almost. And there's a beautiful silence. There's a beautiful feeling of the history of the region as you go through. This is a region that has a long-standing history of wine. The Romans were there. Well, the Romans were everywhere in Europe, and they planted grapes because they needed to. They planted grapes in England, for heaven's sakes. However many hundreds of years ago that was, thousands of years ago. But don't forget, Spain was Moorish. So it was Islam for many years, and this region of Spain lost all grape growing for wine consumption knowledge for over 200 years. The Moors were less in Catalonia than we were in the south. And so it wasn't until some Carthusian monks came. So I got to give you a little bit of color of the story.
The monks were everywhere.
So the Moors are out. Yes, they were definitely. And what's that horrible green yellow drink?
Not abs.
No, not abs. Anyway, it'll come to
chartreuse.
Chartreuse, yes. Sorry, I said horrible to anybody that loves chartreuse. Just the hangovers I've had with chartreuse. So the Carthusian monks said, hey, listen, we got to set up a monastery. They sent 2 Templar knights. Like, I just think of like Monty Python or Harry Potter, guys with swords and stuff. And they get to a place,
Coconuts.
the village that's right next to where our vineyards are. And they asked the local people, this is 700 years ago, more. And they said, where should we build a monastery? And they said, you should do it over there, because occasionally the skies open up and a ladder from heaven comes down and angels go up and down. It's a classic Christian Catholic fable, the Scala Dei, the ladder to God.
Of course.
And so the Monasterio Scala Dei was built, and the monks ruled the region with an iron fist. And they planted as much as they possibly could. Well, the monks didn't plant. They took the local people and they sent them up in the hills and planted every inch they could. Grapes, almonds, hazelnuts, olives. The only things that can grow in this really, really rough terrain. Now, the only thing that's grown there is grapes. The rest of them are grown elsewhere in Spain for more commercial reasons. But they figured out over hundreds of years what grapes grow well and how to grow grapes, and what's the best techniques. But then eventually the land was taken away from the church, like it was in France, given back to the people. The monastery was looted. I'm sure the monks were probably killed by the local people because they weren't really treating the local people so well. I don't know the full story, but that's what I imagine. Yeah. And so some of that history was lost, but they kept growing grapes. They kept using the same methods until phylloxera came away and wiped everything away. One of the most boring things you can ever talk about in wine is phylloxera. Like, I'm sorry, I have to say it, it's just so boring. But every vine was wiped out. 10,000 hectares down to 800. And we only are up to 2,000 hectares in the Priorat. In comparison, Rioja, which we all know, is the other top level category of wine in Spain, DOC or DOQ in Catalan. There's only 2, and there's 65 or so demarcated regions of origin. So the other highest quality one is 65,000 hectares, and we're only 2. Wow. So you could say when they replanted after phylloxera, okay, nobody replanted after phylloxera. So it was a long period of almost 100 years where if you ask an old Catalan person here, what do you think of the Priorat wines? They go, no, those wines are awful, because they were just produced for high alcohol. They were put into casks, sent by mule to Barcelona, where you have a tap and you fill up your jug, which, by the way, you can still do in Barcelona. You can go into many places and there is a cask that's filled with wine, not a bag inside, just wine inside the cask, and they turn the spigot and you can get wine from it. Interesting. Many places. It's not very good wine, but you can still do it. So the old people will say, no, the Priorat wines were awful. It wasn't until 1989, this famed vintage, where 5 don't exist anymore, winery, vineyard owners. I affectionately call them the Clos. Clos de l'Aubac, Clos Erasmus, Clos Mogador, Clos Dauphy, which is now Alvaro Palacios, and Clos Martinet, which is now Mas Martinet. They got together, said, hey, let's bring this region back to the world. Yeah. And they made wine together for the 1989 vintage. They put it into one tank. This is a little aside. All their grapes came together and they made one tank. And then they went and they just put it in the next, and then they put their own label on it. Some people still have retrospective tastings of the 89 vintage go, yeah, see, I always like the Clos Erasmus more than the Clos Mogador. It's the same juice in the same bottles.
Great, good fun fact.
Yeah. So you could say the region is thousands of years old because of the Romans. You could say it's hundreds of years old because of the monks. But really, now I'm saying, well, it's 35 years old because it didn't really turn around until 1989.
I've never heard anyone say that. That's good.
So, sorry?
I've never heard anyone break it down like that or say it's actually 35 years old. That's really interesting, because you hear about like the vines are over 100 years old and but that's really it's a good story. I also always hear it as everyone always calls the Clos like the hippies. Like, did they have experience? Weren't they like students?
And they were all pretty young. Like you can see Daphne now, and she's still pretty young. And this was 35 years ago that she was making wine. She's the owner of Clos Erasmus. So I think she's Greek American. She lives in America anyway.
I one of the coolest wine experiences that I have looking back is I got to go on a catamaran. I did a catamaran wine tasting in the Indian Ocean with Rene Barbier Jr. and Sarah Perez in the middle, like just off the coast of Mauritius. It was the coolest thing ever. We did a masterclass wine tasting on the boat, which was like, you know, talking to a master of wine. You usually don't do a tasting outside with like ocean breeze. That's normally not the best way to taste wine, but on the other hand, it kind of is. So.
So for your listeners, those two people, this is a great story because Rene Barbier Sr., who's now, I would imagine, in his 80s, is the founder of Clos Salanca. And Sarah Perez's father was a founder of Clos Martinet, now Mas Martinet. So these are small towns, small villages. Yep. If you want to date somebody, there's not that many people to date. And so those two got together. They're now married, the Junior and Sarah. They've both taken over their family's winery, and they have a winery together, which is some wines that your listeners should go search out, Venus, La Universal, and some other brands that they have. They're both super, super passionate people who have a specific way of looking at the terroir of the region, which I highly, highly respect. They're lovely, lovely people.
Yeah, it was a great time. But yeah, that was just my memory of them. And now every time I drink those wines, I think like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I was back on a boat in the Indian Ocean?
Yeah. So it's actually a good segue to talk about them because I said that the region could be viewed as 35 years old, but I would argue that it's really 15 years old because those first wines, the Clos, were made with a fair amount of international varieties in them, Cabernet, Merlot, and Syrah. And they were made in a specific, more modern winemaking style, and they continued to be for a while because the region gained popularity on the international marketplace because Robert Parker followed them. He liked the extended maceration. He liked the new oak. He liked some of the international varieties. But they realized after 10, 15 years or more that they didn't want to use international varieties. And they realized the same as consumers that if I want to drink a Cabernet or a Merlot, I'm going to go to Bordeaux or I'm going to go to Napa or Sonoma. Let's go to the places where that is the grape. And this is not indicative of the region, of the history. The extended maceration, you didn't have the monks going in there and doing 5 pump overs a day and punch downs, and they just didn't do it. So they said, okay, let's pull back the international variety. So everybody's replanting. They're replanting to Grenache, but also a lot to Cariñena. Let's dial back the maceration. Let's dial back the new oak. So there's very little new oak anymore in the region. There's only a few specific wines that have new oak on them now. And so this started really 15 years ago. So now I would argue that it's a region that's made grapes since the Romans, but it's really a region where it's 15 years old, where people are trying to discover the best producers like Rene, like Sarah, are trying to discover what is this land telling us to make? What are our individual plots of land trying to make? And because it's such a small region, only 2,000 hectares, and really, if you look at how many wineries are important, I would define that as making sufficient quantity, sufficient quality, international distribution. There's 10, 12 wineries. Yeah. And so those 10 or 12 wineries, Rene and Sarah are 2 of them, are trying to look at what wines should we try to make? What is this land telling us to make? How can we be respectful of the heritage of this region and present the best wine that this land can present?
Okay, so we've been talking about a couple of the Clos, but there's another one that we kind of touched on that's pretty important for this conversation, I would say.
Yes, our wine is called Clos Salanca, and we put the word Clos in there not to sort of leverage the strengths of their brands, which it's more to show and honor respect to their brands. The word Salanca, and I hope that this doesn't get reversed, so you can see Clos Salanca. The Salanca is an old spelling of a little small creek that goes through one of our vineyard parcels. And water is important to all agriculture, and so it's sort of respect from a land perspective and from a water perspective. So Clos for the Clos from 1989, and Salanca for this little bit of water that goes through our property. Frank and I bought 10 hectares, 6 under vine. We have really just traditional varieties. We have Garnacha, we have Cariñena. We also have Grenache Blanc that we make into a white wine. White wine is very rare for the Priorat. The current vintage we have is less than 1,000 bottles. It's very difficult to grow. Less than 7% of the region is white grape varieties. It's a very trendy thing now, and it's hard to get your hands on white wine from the Priorat because it is a red wine region. And so we've been spending our first vintage was 2018. And we have been following the lead of those other producers that are trying to discover the region and trying to figure out what our little plot of land is telling us and what the region is telling us. And it's been a great adventure. It's been great to be working in this very old and traditional region that's rugged, that's very difficult to grow grapes. People probably wonder why Priorat is so expensive. It's because it's very remote. There's no mechanization. Everything is done by hand. Yields are catastrophically low. And it's a labor of love.
I mean, that's definitely I think it has to be a passion project. I mean, I've been to Priorat and I've stood in the vineyards, not working the vines. I mean, I was drinking wine. I was on a beautiful trip, Urno tourism at its finest, and it was hot. Like it's, oh my God, hot and dry. Okay. So the white wine I find very interesting. I got to taste it 2 years ago and it's incredible. I think all of your wines are very, very difficult to get. Like a lot of the great wines in Priorat are hard to get your hands on. There's not a lot of production anywhere. So
I was mentioning earlier this desire to come to Spain, come to the old world and try and bring a little bit of that innovative spirit. And so one of the things we're doing is one of the things that's frustrated me about the wine business is the story gets lost. And the story is not just a marketing brand book, blah, blah, blah. It's actually what is the person trying to do? What is the team? What is the family trying to do when they make wine? Because, Jana, I'll be honest with you, anybody can make wine. Like you just go buy some grapes, ferment it, put it in a bottle, try your best to sell it, but anybody can do it. There's so much wine out there. You should only be making wine if you have a clear idea of why you're trying to make it, what you're trying to do. And so that's what we are trying to communicate that to our final customer. And I get frustrated by the normal distribution channel where you sell to an importer who sells to a distributor who sells to a retailer or restaurant. And all the way along the way, what is really behind the bottle gets lost. And so this connection with the person that's actually opening the wine and drinking it is so critically important to us. And in a different way than you all are doing it, called dVIN, we're trying to connect. We both have the same goal, which is to connect with the producer with the final drinker.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I was going to say we're doing it, and I think it's unique for us just because we make so little wine. We're following sort of a California model where we have limited amounts, so we have to sort of allocate it. Unfortunately, I wish we made tons of wine where just anybody who wants it can get it. And we sell 6 bottles to each person on our mailing list once a year. But we're trying to have direct contact. So I travel all around the world. We're sold in Asia, we're sold in America, we're sold in Canada, of course, all over Europe. But I go to events and meet our customers. But I also follow sort of the Gary Vaynerchuk style of putting my phone number on everything. I put my email on everything. I respond to every text, WhatsApp, email that people have because I am desperate to tell people about this corner of the wine world, tell them about our vineyards. And so that's how I'm bringing a little bit of that innovative spirit from California into what we're doing.
That is, yeah, Napa has it figured out when it comes to D2C. Like there's not a lot of wine regions in the world that have that kind of nailed, and Napa's a really good example. So that's interesting. So how does one get on your mailing list, David?
Well, go to the website, send me a message on the contact me, and I personally will be responding to you.
Excellent. So I will be putting myself on that list. What is the website? We'll put it up in the show notes.
It's closalanca.com. Very straightforward. SAL.
There we go. It's not flipped, so that's perfect. So
yeah,
CLOSSALANCA for anyone who's listening to this on the podcast and not looking at the beautiful back label of David's wine as he holds it up to the camera. Okay, so what's your total production? How many bottles do you make a year?
We make for our core reds, we make 500 6-packs. We're trying to work. Listen, we're talking very low yields.
Yeah.
For our white wine, we make this vintage was 867 bottles. We also have in certain years. So a little small story. We had one portion in one of our vineyards, one parcel, where we looked and there were scrawny little vines. They were planted in rock and they weren't producing anything. A vine will produce somewhere between 1 kilo and 3 kilos of grapes per vine, depending on the grape variety, where you are in the world. The Priorat barely gets to 1 kilo in general. And this section was giving us, in a good year, 200 to 300 grams per vine. And we were doing a lot of biodiversity work. We think that, for example, our land has never had synthetic chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides for long reasons I won't mention. We've been organic certified for almost 30 years, from the previous owner through to us. Large amount of respect for the land, and we're doing some work at figuring out, when were these vines planted, because everything was planted when we bought it. And we found a planting record of this little corner that was planted in 1915, in the middle of the First World War, 25-ish years after phylloxera wiped out the grapes, when the Priorat was just dirt paths with donkeys and carts. There would have been nothing else. Cars wouldn't make it to the Priorat for many years.
Sure.
And somebody planted these Cariñena vines. And so when we figured that out, we decided to pick them separately, vinify them separately. We've only been able to make it 3 times in 7 years. And it's a wine we call Centurion, with some nice Roman shield on the front. This is our first vintage. We made 380 bottles of 100-plus-year-old vine Cariñena.
Wow.
So, but our core wine, our two reds, we only make 500 6-packs a year.
Oh my gosh! See, the FOMO. It makes a lot of sense as well. That, I mean, if I had a winery, they always say, don't get high on your own supply. But if you're making that little, it's not like you're even pulling out a bottle at dinner casually. It's like you're thinking about not only, I'm sure you're thinking about not only like when is an appropriate time to open a bottle on your own, the fruits of your labor, but like whose hand are you putting it in? And so it makes a lot of sense that you want people to understand the story. I think that's great.
It does, but Frank and I are also very much of the attitude of wine is meant to be drunk with friends, with family. And so by myself, I'm not opening up a bottle of Centurion, granted. But this wine is meant to be shared. It is a joy in life. And yes, it does get opened.
All right. I mean, everyone who's listening to this, we're going to bombard David with emails to get on that mailing list. Sounds fantastic. And just like we're almost to time. So back to innovation. How do you see Priorat in terms of innovation? Is it very, very much traditional? I mean, we kind of touched on it at the beginning. Or do you think that most of those, let's say 10 wineries that we talked about, are they really adopting innovation? And if so, in what sense?
I think there is a movement back to traditional. So you have people refurbishing old casks and foudres and going back to traditional winemaking, but at the same time, not being idiots and testing the wine and properly sulfiting it, all the work to make sure the wine gets to the final consumer clean and the way that they intended it, so that it tastes like it's from the land. I think part of the innovation in the region is about the viticulture. We have very, very poor soils. For those who know about soil science, we have less than 1% organic matter in our soils, and you need 3 to 5. And so people are looking at methods of viticulture to try and enhance soil structure. It's really just rocks. We have this kind of schist slate friable rock that you crunches as you walk through the vineyard. So we're trying to add really just a little bit of dirt in there. And one of the ways we're doing, and other people like Rene Barbier Jr. at Clos Morgador, is regenerative agriculture. And so that's a way of not plowing, so you don't aerate the soil, so that you're not releasing all the air, putting air in to kill all the microorganisms. You're trying to sequester carbon. You're trying to build up the soil matter in many different methods. And I encourage everybody that is interested in anything about agriculture, and in specifics about climate change, because regenerative agriculture could be a scalable, large scale way to sequester carbon and to look at improving the health of the planet. So that's what we're trying to do. That's where the real innovation I see in the region. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, I feel like we need to maybe do another one of these at some point about just regenerative agriculture. I feel like that's something I'd love to
Do a quick
continue.
little chat GPT on it for all you out there listening, and just see what it really means and how it could change the world.
That sounds fascinating. We could dig into all this. I know we're getting close to time. So also the climate change thing. I wrote my thesis when I did my WSET diploma. I wrote my thesis on winemaking and climate change, and was like, whoa. I mean, as a wine professional or anyone who's interested in wine, and if you've done any of your WSET levels, you obviously have thought at some point, probably more than a little bit, about climate change and winemaking alone. So also fascinating. We could dig into that too. But just to kind of close it off with a little piece on innovation, and kind of tie it back to our dVIN followers, tie it back into kind of the dVIN storyline. The way I'm thinking about this now, there's all kinds of different reasons why at dVIN Labs we want to put fine wine, investment grade wine, thoughtfully made wine on the blockchain. And a lot of the reasons are it's win-win-win. But one of the reasons is, of course, that D2C thing that we talked about. So for some wineries, and I could see this actually being really interesting in the Priorat, is you want to know at the end who's drinking your wines. So if you're not able to sell direct to consumer, and it does end up going through that entire value chain, which is in the wine industry pretty complex and fragmented and opaque, then just being able to get that information back as a winemaker to say, oh, this is interesting. So my wine, I know that this is my bottle, and I know that it's been it left the winery on this date, and I can see where it's checked in, and chain of custody and chain of ownership are tracked. But then at the end, who's really my truest fan, and who are they drinking my bottle with? Not only who was the end consumer and purchased it, but who are they sharing it with? Like you said, you drink wine with friends. So it would be very interesting in the, we're playing the long game, as most things with wine are the long game. You're making wine for the next generation, usually at this level. And so finding out, who your truest fans are is a pretty interesting and powerful thing. So that's kind of where I see our, what we do really tying into a region like Priorat. Whereas, if we're talking about the big investment grade names like the DRC, the name drops, or the Petrus or Lafite or those kind of wines. It's about a lot of things as well, with counterfeit and trying to counter the counterfeit, and all kinds of other benefits of putting wine on chain and having an open marketplace and things. But for Priorat, I really like that consumer connection piece. I think you nailed it there. So for all of our club members and everything watching, that's the.
I ran a masterclass in Amsterdam 2 weeks ago, and we had the privilege of having 2 vintages of L'Ermite, which is Álvaro Palacios' top wine, retails for over €1,000 a bottle. Difficult to get. He doesn't make that much of it. Very, very special wine. But we had the current-ish release. I think it was 2020 or 22. But we also had a 2000 vintage. And I thought, how cool would it be to see, okay, so the 2020, I went to the distributor, got to this person, and resold to the restaurant. Got it. Where did that 2000 vintage go? How did it sit in somebody's cellar for 18 years? Or did it go through 6 hands? Did it go through here? That would be really cool to know, because you're spending a fortune on a bottle of wine, and wouldn't it be nice to know technically where it was?
Yep. That's nailed it. Yeah, exactly. And also, like, how many of them are left? Like, if you're paying $1,000 for it, but you now know there's no data in wine the way it works right now. You don't know how many bottles are actually out there. If you knew that there's like 6 left and you're opening one, and then the price of the other ones is now going up, like, and you can see it all, the data's all there. I mean, that's just that's kind of part of the thing that fascinates me as well. Of course, knowing that your bottle is has been in good condition as a buyer, if you're buying on secondary, be nice to know. Dave always throws me under the bus and says, so if I know that the wine wasn't in the back of Jana's car at Walmart in the sun, and I'm like, he always says the same thing. But yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we covered it, and I didn't even have to. I'm going to give myself up anyways. I am always drinking a glass of wine. David did his homework and is drinking a glass of wine. I drank a little bit of wine yesterday. Yesterday was my birthday. I drank a little bit more wine than I would tend to drink on a Tuesday evening. So I'm taking a break today, but I kind of did my homework. I got the bottle. I've got a pretty interesting bottle here that
it's a producer's Esther Nin, who's one of the 10 or 12 producers, and she has just an incredible talent. She's also the winemaker still, I think, for Daphne Glorian, who's the owner of Chloe Rasmus. So she has that side, and she has her own project. Those wines are really great, and I think representative of somebody who's going in and saying, what is this land telling us? And so enjoy that when you open it, and happy birthday, Jen.
Thank you. And I will enjoy it when I open it. And it's not going to be today. Also, I think my husband will kill me if I open it without him. So he loves Priorat, loves it. So yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do my little plug for our article that went out this week. Everyone who follows dVIN knows by now that every Sunday we put out a long form article. So my co-founder, David Garrett, puts out a great long form article about a different topic every week. This week, the topic has been about building an open standard for wine, not another closed marketplace. And the key idea is that when you build a protocol, you unlock value for everyone. So it also talks a little bit about the VIN token, VIN coin that we launched in September, and how we're aligning incentives across the entire wine ecosystem. So if you're interested in learning more about that, make sure that you check out the article. As always, it is at news.dvinlabs.com. And we are going to turn this into a podcast. So thank you so much, David, Master of Wine on the show. It's so cool. And also goals. Congrats. I know it was 2017 when you achieved it, but I still feel like congrats are in order. Big time. So thank you very much for joining, and I will make sure that we put the winery website in the show notes.
Thank you. Good day. Thanks
David.
for having me. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.